river runs silent, but it knows the way through the bones of the forest where shadows play. An old sign swings on a rusted chain. Welcome to nowhere, where the ghosts remain. Whispers in the rafters, whispers in the trees, secrets in the soil, carried by the breeze. The town hides its story, buried down deep. It's the secrets they keep. It's the secrets they keep.
Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, staining the sky with bruised shades of violet and gold, the group decided to head to their favorite place, 3 Pines. For years it had been more than just a cafe. It was a constant, a shelter from everything that waited outside the valley. Sitting at the very edge of the park, the old wooden building was half swallowed by wild ivy, its windows glowing softly as twilight crept in. Inside, the familiar scent of freshly baked cake and warm spices wrapped around them like a memory. Low country music hummed through hidden speakers. Cozy, warm, unchanged. They slid into their usual corner table, the same one where, 7 years ago, they had spent endless afternoons with sticky fingers and too big dreams. The place was only half full, yet the room buzzed quietly, like it was holding its breath. Daniel had already arrived. He took the seat right beside Lena, their shoulders brushing as if by accident, again and again. Every few minutes they dissolved into laughter, nudged one another under the table, shared secretive looks, as if no one else existed. The conversation drifted naturally toward the upcoming school year. "I'm actually thinking of starting an astronomy club," Nadia said, twirling her spoon through foam she had no intention of drinking. "I talked to Mr. Keller already. He seemed suspiciously enthusiastic. If anyone's interested, you can sign up," she added, flashing a hopeful smile toward Victoria. Alex snorted softly, leaning back in his chair. "Thanks, but spending my nights staring into the void isn't exactly my thing." "That wasn't really aimed at you," Nadia shot back, unbothered. Across the table, Natalia sighed. "I'll be stuck at my mom's bridal boutique after school this year, so if I disappear, assume I've been buried under tulle and lace." "That explains the trauma in advance," Daniel muttered. Before anyone could respond, a tall, thin man stopped at their table. The waiter. He was slightly hunched, with graying hair and deep shadows under his eyes, as if sleep avoided him deliberately. Without a word, he placed 2 steaming pizzas between them. "Thanks, Greg," Alex said absently, barely looking up from his phone. Greg didn't move right away. His gaze lingered on them, longer than necessary. "So," he said at last, one corner of his mouth twitching, "planning to make this your second home again this year?" "Different lineup this time," Natalia replied, nodding toward Victoria. "This is Victoria. She'd just moved back to the valley." Greg raised his eyebrows slightly. "Back, huh?" He gave a slow nod. "Well, welcome home. If you only knew how much money these guys left here last year, you'd feel obligated to stay." "We're just supporting local businesses," Natalie laughed lightly, "doing our part to keep 3 Pines alive." Something flickered across Greg's face, a hesitation, a shadow. His voice dropped, almost dissolving into the hum of the cafe. "You might be doing more than you realize." He glanced over his shoulder, as if checking whether the walls were listening. "Especially after what happened out there a few months ago," he added quietly. "Since the disappearance, things haven't really been the same." Silence crashed down at the table. Music, cutlery, conversations around them, all suddenly distant. What disappearance? Victoria asked slowly, her smile gone. The air felt colder. And did you hear? The waiter added, his voice dropping even further, as if the words themselves might overhear. Another person went missing a few days ago. Supposedly someone from your high school. He hesitated. That makes 6 this year. Lena looked up at him sharply, unease flashing across her features. 6? She repeated, barely louder than a breath. The waiter seemed to snap back to himself. He straightened abruptly, as though remembering his place. I shouldn't be saying things like that, he muttered. Didn't mean to ruin your evening. He forced a tired smile. Enjoy your food. Then he was gone, slipping into the kitchen like a shadow, retreating into darkness. For a moment, no one spoke. Victoria let her gaze travel slowly around the table. Every face had changed, smiles erased, shoulders tense, eyes avoiding one another. Okay, she said quietly. Can someone please explain what's going on? Silence answered her. They exchanged brief, loaded glances, the kind that carried whole conversations without a word. Finally, Natalia inhaled slowly. You need to know something, Victoria, she said. Cherry Valley isn't the same place anymore. It's not the quiet little town you remember. Daniel leaned forward, fingers laced together. For about a year now, people have been disappearing, he said. Different kinds of people. Teenagers, adults, elderly. His voice lowered. No signs of struggle, no clues. From their homes, the streets, even the forest. The police say they're investigating, he went on, but that's all they ever say. No updates, no explanations. And adults don't talk about it, Alex cut in, irritation sharp in his tone. Our parents act like if they pretend it isn't happening, it'll just stop. Natalia nodded grimly. Like saying it out loud might invite something worse. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. The memory came uninvited, the whisper curling against her thoughts like smoke. Victoria. The darkness has awakened. You are not safe. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the table. That couldn't be a coincidence. She swallowed, then spoke, quietly. My mom didn't say anything about this, Victoria murmured. Neither did my dad. Her voice trembled despite her attempt to steady it. That's really strange. For a moment, no one answered. Then Lena exhaled slowly. That's kind of the point, she said. They don't tell anyone, especially people who just came back. Daniel nodded. Maybe they think keeping you in the dark is safer. Alex looked unconvinced. Or maybe they're just scared. Silence settled over the table again, thick, heavy, and full of things no one wanted to say out loud. They stayed at 3 Pines another hour, maybe 2. Time blurred. Conversations softened, deliberately drifting back towards safer, ordinary topics. Laughter returned, a little forced, a little too loud, as if everyone were trying to convince themselves that nothing had changed. Outside, night had fully settled in. The forest surrounding Cherry Valley swallowed the last traces of daylight, while street lamps painted the wet cobblestones in trembling pools of yellow light. Eventually, when the clock above the bar crept too close to midnight, they agreed it was time to leave. The cool evening air greeted them outside, carrying the damp scent of earth and pine. Anyone need a walk home? Alex asked. We're good. We're close, Natalia said, nudging Nadia, who nodded. We'll head back together, Lena added, elbowing Daniel. He's terrified of the dark. Daniel scoffed. Absolutely. That's why I brought you for protection. I'll be fine, Victoria said, glancing toward the narrow path leading to her father's house. I actually like walking alone. Lena studied her for a moment. You're sure? Victoria smiled faintly. I'm sure. They parted with quick hugs, fist bumps, quiet laughter. and a near unison chorus of, "See you tomorrow." Victoria stood alone for a heartbeat in the empty street, listening as their footsteps faded, one by one, into the dark. Then she breathed in and started walking. Cherry Valley felt different at night. The town that by day seemed calm and familiar, transformed after dark into something watchful. Street lamps cast fragile light, mist curled low along the sidewalks, and the wind whispered through the branches, stirring leaves like restless spirits. Victoria walked slowly, hands buried deep in her jacket pockets, Natalia's words replaying in her mind. Disappearances, silence, fear disguised as normalcy. As a child, this place had felt safe, almost idyllic. Now it felt fractured, as if something beneath the trimmed hedges and pastel facades was waking up. Then she heard it. Footsteps, muffled, behind her. Victoria stopped. The sound stopped too. Her breath caught. "Hello?" she whispered, and the night did not answer. She was already close to home when it happened. All of a sudden, she heard muffled footsteps behind her. She stopped. She turned sharply, her heart lurching in her chest. The street was empty. Only a squirrel darted across the road, vanishing into the bushes. Victoria let out a quiet breath, but the tension didn't fade. She kept walking, faster now. Then she heard it. A whisper. Barely audible, as if carried by the wind, yet disturbingly clear. "Victoria, we need you." She froze, rooted to the spot. She looked around, pulse roaring in her ears, but there was no one there. Just empty pavement, street lamps, and stretching shadows. "You must restore the balance." The second whisper was closer. Too close, as if it were right beside her. Fear twisted sharply in her stomach. Her heart began to pound wildly. She broke into a run, not daring to look back, focused only on one thing, getting home, behind solid walls. "It's just exhaustion," she told herself desperately. Just exhaustion. A new town, a different climate. Too many emotions. By the time she reached the front door, her hands were shaking. She unlocked it quickly, slipped inside, and slammed it shut behind her. Leaning against the cold wood, she forced herself to breathe. "I need rest," she whispered to the empty hallway. "It'll pass. Probably." She didn't sound convinced. The next day felt nothing like the last. The August warmth was gone, replaced by a cool, autumn breeze slipping through half-open windows. Heavy gray clouds blanketed the sky, releasing a thin, persistent rain. Victoria sat curled up in her bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, still in her pajamas. Her phone rested in her hands, a video call open with the girls. "What are you wearing for tomorrow's assembly?" Natalia asked, fixing her hair in the camera. "I don't know. Same as always. White top, dark bottoms," Lena replied with a yawn. "It's just the first day of school." "Just the first day?" Natalia echoed, offended. "Yeah, well, for you, it's probably the most important day of the year," Nadia said, dry amusement edging her voice. "Obviously," Natalia replied solemnly. The screen filled with laughter. "I found this navy plaid skirt at a thrift shop a few days before I left," Victoria added with a small smile. "It's really cute." "Careful with skirts, Vicky," Natalia teased. "What's that supposed to mean?" Victoria asked, raising an eyebrow. "She means the principal," Lena explained. "You barely see him at school, but when you do, he somehow always notices if your skirt's too short. Total grouch." They chatted for a few more minutes, the mood light and familiar, until Victoria glanced at the clock. "All right, I should go," she said. "I want to check my schedule online." "Good luck," Nadia called. "And try not to get scolded by the principal," Natalia added with a grin. Victoria disconnected, set her phone aside, and opened her laptop. She scrolled absent-mindedly, until a strange sound outside caught her attention. Slowly, she stood and approached the window. On one of the branches just beyond the glass sat a large, black crow. It stared straight at her, emitting low, hoarse sounds, half caw, half rasp. Victoria frowned. "What do you want?" she whispered, fully aware she wouldn't get an answer. That's when she heard it again, behind her. "You must find us!" Victoria spun around. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. The room was empty. No one could have been there. Everything looked perfectly normal, as if nothing strange had happened at all. She turned back toward the window. The crow was gone. Vanished, as if it had never been there. "This is really not funny anymore," she murmured. She sat back down on her bed, hugging her knees to her chest. She could feel it now. This was becoming too much. The whispers, the birds, the disappearances. She knew she had to talk to her father about what was happening in Cherry Valley, about the voices, about the missing people. She had a sinking feeling that if she didn't find answers soon, all of this would only get worse. But would he avoid the subject too, like the parents of her friends? Victoria sat motionless on the bed, staring blankly at the glow of her laptop screen. Her thoughts kept circling back to the crow, and the whispers she'd now heard twice. It was getting harder and harder to blame it all on exhaustion or imagination. Just then, her father peeked into the room. He leaned against the doorframe, holding a mug with the last traces of coffee. "Vicky," he said casually, "feel like getting some fresh air? We're out of milk, and I've still got a project to finish for one of my most annoying but also most loyal clients." Victoria tore her gaze away from the screen and exhaled in relief. "Sure," she said. "I've been sitting in this room long enough." She slipped off the bed, stretched, then grabbed her jacket and umbrella. "I'll be right back." A moment later, she was walking down an empty street, sheltered beneath the umbrella from the light rain that still lazily fell from the sky. The air was cool, but refreshing, the kind that cleared your head. She turned onto the familiar side street, leading to the nearest grocery store. Inside, the place was dimly lit and smelled faintly of damp concrete mixed with cleaning products. Victoria stopped in front of the refrigerated section and studied the shelf of milk. Lactose-free? Almond? Soy? She frowned slightly. "Those are trendy now, right?" a familiar voice said behind her. "Milk substitutes, I mean. I never really got the appeal." Victoria turned and recognized him instantly. The same boy she had bumped into yesterday. The same thoughtful face, calm eyes that seemed to actually notice things. "Hi," she said, smiling. "Hey," he replied, returning the smile easily. "Do you live around here?" "Just a few streets away. You?" "More or less the same," he said with a shrug. "Close enough to keep running into the same grocery stores." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you go to the high school?" He nodded. "Senior year. So if you're in high school too, chances are we'll pass each other in the hallway." Victoria felt a small spark of excitement. There was only one high school in town, so the odds were definitely in her favor. She studied him for a moment, brow creasing slightly. "Can I ask you something kind of random?" she said. "Sure." "Do you play football?" He blinked, surprised, and then laughed softly. "No," he said. "Absolutely not." Victoria tilted her head. "Really? I thought I saw you once on the field a while back." She remembered it suddenly, him standing in the middle of the field, sunlight on his hair, and then, later, not seeing him there anymore. He shook his head, still smiling. "Trust me, football is the worst sport imaginable. All that running, shouting, pretending you're not exhausted." He made a face. "Definitely not for me." Victoria laughed. "Okay, fair enough. By the way," he added, holding out his hand, "I'm Damien." "Victoria," she said, shaking it. His grip was warm and confident, but gentle. "Nice to meet you, Victoria." He glanced at his watch. "I've got to go. Someone's waiting for me." "I hope we run into each other again," she said. not even pretending she didn't mean it. He smiled, slightly wider this time. I'm sure we will. Then he turned and headed for the exit, hands in his pockets, moving with that same unhurried, calm stride. Victoria watched him disappear between the aisles before finally turning back to the shelf. She grabbed regular milk. After that conversation, experimenting suddenly felt unnecessary. On the way home, she smiled to herself beneath the umbrella. For a few precious minutes, she forgot about the crow, the whispers, the disappearances. She felt like a normal teenager again. Her thoughts drifted back to Damien. Did he have a girlfriend? What kind of music did he listen to? Was he as calm all the time as he seemed? She'd find out next time. A few days after the official start of the school year, the building finally slipped into its usual rhythm. The hallways buzzed with noise, new friendships forming, and endless complaints about backpacks that were far too heavy. Victoria, Nadia, and Alex ended up in the same class. Natalie, Lena, and Daniel were placed in the parallel one. It was another gloomy, rain-soaked day. Raindrops tapped steadily against the windows, and the gray sky outside did nothing to help anyone focus. The classroom felt drowsy. History. Victoria sat in the back row with Nadia. Nadia was busy scribbling notes, hunched over her notebook as if her life depended on it. Victoria, chin propped on her elbow, stared out at the rain-streaked window. She was thinking about him. He hadn't been at the opening ceremony. She hadn't seen him in the hallways either, not once in the past few days. Damien. Had he lied? Maybe he didn't go to the school after all. Or maybe he'd just been messing with her. Victoria leaned closer to Nadia, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Hey, do you know students from the higher grades? That depends, Nadia replied without looking up. Which one? A guy, Damien. He said he's a senior. Nadia finally raised her head, one eyebrow arching. You know what? When it comes to guys, you should probably ask Alex. She nodded toward the boy sitting in front of them. Victoria lightly tapped Alex between the shoulders. He leaned back with an exaggerated sigh. Yes? Do you know anyone named Damien in senior year? Tall, light hair, she said, trying to make the description sound useful. Alex frowned, thinking it over. Damien? No, can't say I do. At least not in fourth year. He paused. Maybe he's new, or maybe you've got the names mixed up. Victoria shook her head slightly. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was Damien. She hesitated, then exhaled softly. But never mind. It doesn't matter. Victoria turned back to the window. But would I? Maybe he had lied. Maybe his name hadn't even been Damien. And yet, she couldn't shake the quiet hope that she'd see him again. The teacher's voice suddenly cut through her thoughts, sharper now. A ripple of movement passed through the class. All right, everyone, I need your full attention, the teacher said. We're moving on to a very important topic, one you'll be preparing a project on. The room fell silent. Victoria opened her notebook, though her focus still wavered. Cherry Valley dates back to the late 17th century, the teacher began. It was founded by the Shafransky family, a noble house with considerable ambition. Her voice was clear, steady, and unexpectedly compelling. The Shafranskys dreamed of creating a unique regional cherry liqueur. They searched for the perfect place to cultivate cherry orchards. Since the plant itself isn't very demanding, they chose a location surrounded by mountains and forests, and that is how Cherry Valley came to be. Nadia's pen moved furiously. Victoria glanced at her with a small smile. Over the years, cherry orchards spread, the town grew. Syrups, liqueurs, jams. There were even cherry-based cosmetics. The town's reputation flourished. She paused. But then, strange things began to happen. The class seemed to freeze. Victoria stopped pretending to take notes. Now she was listening. Really listening. people began to disappear. Screams were heard in the forests. Strange symbols appeared on walls. Rumors spread that the Shafranskys had been in contact with the other side, that they performed rituals, that dark magic was woven into the very foundations of the town. Nadia raised her hand. "What happened to them?" she asked. "To the family?" The teacher smiled faintly. "I'm glad you asked, because that is your assignment. You have 1 month to prepare a presentation on the history of the Shafransky family." She gestured lightly. "Pair up." After the lesson, Victoria, Nadia, and Alex filed out of the classroom together. "Did you hear all that?" Nadia asked, eyes wide. "Did you know any of this?" "First time for me," Alex muttered. "But hey, nice to know we're living in a haunted town." During lunch break, the whole group gathered at one table in the cafeteria. Victoria animatedly told Natalia, Lena, and Daniel about the history lesson, about the Shafransky family, the disappearances, and the unsettling rumors tied to Cherry Valley. "What?" Lena looked surprised. "We covered that topic too, but we didn't get any project." "Exactly," Natalia added. "Just talk about cherry liqueurs and orchards. Nothing else." "Unfair," Alex sighed dramatically. "Our fate is eternal labor." "Looks like we got a more ambitious teacher," Nadia muttered. "Or we're just unlucky," Victoria concluded, reaching for her fork. While Nadia and Alex immediately started discussing how to divide the project, Victoria stared at the blank page in her notebook. She needed a partner. But who? And even though the topic itself was intriguing, her thoughts kept drifting back to Damien, to who he really was, and why he'd vanished so completely. After the last class, Victoria slowly packed her notebooks into her backpack. Nadia and Alex had already left, still debating who would handle which part of the presentation. Victoria was left behind, still without a partner, still unsure who she could approach. She was just leaving the school when she noticed someone waiting near the entrance. A boy, slim, with a mess of dark hair and eyes that rarely seemed to meet anyone else's. She recognized him from class. He usually sat alone, spoke to no one, existing slightly off to the side of everyone else. He approached her hesitantly. "Hey, Victoria, right?" "Yes," she replied, a little surprised. "And you are?" "Philip. I sit in the back, by the window." He hesitated, glancing away. "I don't really have anyone to do the project with. I thought maybe you didn't either." Victoria paused, just for a second. He seemed polite, quiet, and there was something about him, a calm that felt almost unsettling, yet strangely compelling. "Sure," she said at last, offering a small smile. "We can work together." His face brightened slightly. "Great. Maybe you could come by my place? I live nearby. We can talk things through, plan everything." She nodded. "Yeah, why not?" They walked together, talking about the project. It turned out Philip lived on one of the side streets near the park, a modest but well-kept house with a wooden porch and a dog that lazily lifted its head when they stepped inside. "Is anyone else home?" Victoria asked, slipping off her jacket. "Just my mom," Philip said, nodding toward the kitchen. "She works for the police, but she's off today." "Police?" Victoria asked, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Yeah, criminal division." He smiled faintly. "But don't ask her about work. There's a lot she's not allowed to talk about." Victoria raised her eyebrows, intrigued. On one hand, she was glad she'd made a new acquaintance. Philip was nothing like the people she usually hung around with. On the other, a thought crept in. What if, through him, I can learn more about the disappearances? When they entered his room, Victoria froze in the doorway. The walls were almost completely covered in photographs. Some printed, some cut from newspapers. Faces, young and old, women and men, each marked with captions. Missing, last seen, search in progress, threads stretched between them, notes, symbols, and in the center of it all, a large, hand-drawn family tree. One name written boldly at its core, Shafransky. Victoria stepped inside slowly, not speaking for several long seconds. Philip watched her carefully, but he didn't look embarrassed. "Impressive, right?" he said quietly. "Kind of a weird hobby for a high schooler." "What is all this?" she asked softly, moving closer to the wall. "These people, are they all from Cherry Valley?" "Most of them. Some from nearby towns," Philip said, joining her. "I don't know what's happening here, but I know something has been happening. For years, and no one talks about it." Victoria stared at him, eyes wide. "Does your mom know?" "She probably knows something, but she won't say," he replied with a bitter half-smile. "Official secrets, procedures, protecting investigations." He waved a hand dismissively. "I tried asking once. She told me it was better if I stayed out of it, that there are things I don't understand." He looked back at the wall. "So I decided to figure it out on my own." Victoria stepped closer to the family tree. "The Shafranskys, so it's not just a legend?" "No." Philip shook his head. "I have proof they existed, and that their descendants could still be here. I don't know exactly who yet, but everything starts with them, and ends with them." "You think they're connected to the disappearances?" "Either them," he said quietly, "or someone who believes they are." Victoria took a slow breath. "This is going to sound strange," she said, "but since I came back here, I feel like—" She hesitated. "Like something is watching me. Like something wants something from me. I've had weird experiences." Philip studied her closely. "What kind of experiences?" She told him about the crow, the whispers, the boy who appeared like a ghost, and vanished just as suddenly. Philip didn't laugh, didn't brush it off. He nodded slowly, as if piecing together a puzzle. "It's not a coincidence," he said at last. "We might be closer to the truth than I thought." For the first time in a long while, Victoria felt she wasn't alone, that she wasn't the only one who sensed things, who heard things that shouldn't exist. She looked at Philip. "We'll do this project," she said firmly. "But not just for a grade. We'll help each other. We'll figure out what's really going on in Cherry Valley." Philip smiled, genuinely, for the first time that day. "Deal." That night, Victoria had another strange dream. At first, there was only darkness. Then the image began to sharpen. A boy. The same one as always. The one who had started appearing in her dreams ever since she had left Warsaw. The one whose face she had never fully seen. He was walking alone through a forest. Tall trees loomed overhead, their dense branches tangled like a black canopy. Beneath his feet, wet leaves crunched softly with every step, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. He stopped beside a massive ancient tree. Its sprawling branches resembled enormous skeletal hands reaching out of the darkness. He stood there for a long moment, as if waiting. Suddenly, he turned around. His face was finally clear, filled with unease, with fear. And then it happened again. The whispers. Soft, but unmistakable, cutting straight through her thoughts. "You cannot run from your role." Victoria didn't know whether those words were meant for her, or for the boy trapped inside the dream. She jolted upright in bed. Her body was slick with sweat. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. Heat clung to her skin even though the window stood slightly open, letting in the cool night air. She didn't fall back asleep. Not once. The next day, Victoria and Philip met in front of the town library. "Maybe we'll find something here," Philip said, adjusting his backpack strap. "Places like this hide the real gems." Inside, they split up to search the collections more efficiently. Victoria headed straight for the section on local history. Her fingers traced the spines of old books until one title made her stop. Whispers of Cherry Valley. Whispers? She murmured. Not again. The book was wedged high up on the top shelf. She rose onto her toes, stretching, but it was just out of reach. Then a hand appeared beside hers and effortlessly pulled the book free. Need help? Victoria spun around. Damien. You? Her voice betrayed her surprise. What are you doing here? He smiled faintly and handed her the book. I come here sometimes, he said calmly. I'm looking for something specific. And you? History project, she replied, studying him closely. Then, more quietly, Damien, you really do go to our school, right? He laughed softly. You thought I made it up? A little, she admitted. You weren't at the opening ceremony, or around those first few days. I got sick, he explained. That storm, remember? I was soaked to the bone. Lost a few days, he shrugged. But I'm fine now. You'll probably see me in the halls soon. Okay, Victoria nodded, though unease still coiled low in her chest. So what book are you looking for? Damien hesitated. Just for a second, like the truth had been right there, on the tip of his tongue. Then he shook his head. Nothing important. His gaze flicked to the book in her hands. But you, before you read that, you should think carefully. Why? She frowned. Because not every truth wants to be uncovered, he said quietly. And once you step into your role... His voice dropped. There's no turning back. My role, Victoria whispered. What are you talking about? Victoria? Philip's voice echoed from the other side of the room. Come here. I found something. She turned her head. When she looked back, Damien was gone. No footsteps, no movement between the shelves. Just empty space. She stood there, clutching the book. Philip walked over to her. Who were you talking to? Damien, she said uncertainly, glancing around again. He was just here. Who? The guy from the grocery store. I told you about him. Her voice dropped. I don't know how he does it, but he disappears. Like that. Philip studied her, disbelief flickering across his face, quickly followed by something else. Concern. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and freshly ground coffee. Philip and Victoria took a seat at one of the tables by the window. Outside, the sun was slowly sinking, flooding the street with warm shades of orange and gold. This is where Lena works, Victoria said, slipping off her coat and draping it over the back of her chair. She'll probably come over in a moment. Philip glanced around the cozy interior until his gaze landed on a girl in an apron approaching their table with a tray. Hey, Lena, Victoria smiled. This is Philip, my friend from school. Nice to meet you, Lena said with a polite smile, setting 2 steaming cups of tea in front of them. Likewise, Philip replied. Lena nodded and moved on to another table, leaving them alone. Almost immediately, Victoria and Philip leaned over her bag, pulling out 2 books, Whispers of Cherry Valley, and a thick volume Philip had found at the library, Secrets and Conspiracies of 19th Century Poland. So, Philip said, glancing between them, which one do we start with? Mine, Victoria suggested. The title feels too accurate to be a coincidence. Philip nodded. Victoria opened the book carefully, as if expecting something to leap from the pages. Nothing did. She stared at a blank page, turned it. Another blank page, and another. What the... she murmured. You're kidding, Philip said, leaning in. He flipped through several more pages. It's empty, completely empty. Every single page. Victoria looked at him, surprise mixing with disappointment. That can't be random. Who puts a book full of blank pages into a public library? Philip scoffed. That's ridiculous. But Victoria didn't respond. She stared at the white pages, as if trying to see something hidden beneath the surface. words that refused to reveal themselves. Why did Damien warn me about this book? The thought slipped into her mind. Or maybe that's exactly why. Maybe it isn't empty for everyone. Without a word, she slid the book back into her bag. Okay, Philip said after a moment. Then let's try mine. He opened his book, flipped through the table of contents, and stopped. Oh, look at this, he said. Secret societies. There's something about our region. Victoria leaned closer as he began to read aloud. In the second half of the 19th century, in southern Poland, among mountain valleys and remote settlements, whispers began to spread about Cherry Valley, a place where the boundary between the world of the living and the world of spirits was said to be unusually thin. Residents reported disappearances, vivid dreams, and voices rising from the forest at dusk. During this time, the Shafransky family, settled in the valley for generations, was rumored to have founded a secret society. Its purpose was to maintain balance between the human world and the spirit realm, and to communicate with the other side through rituals and magic. The society was said to operate in secrecy, guarding this balance across generations. Philip raised his eyebrows. That's intense, he commented, though he didn't really expect an answer. Victoria was silent. Balance between worlds. The words echoed in her thoughts. Victoria, you must restore the balance. One of the whispers from her dream. Her fingers tightened around the cup of tea. Could any of this actually be true? Had the society really existed? Or worse, did it still exist? Philip's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. My mom, he answered. Yeah, I'm heading out now. I'll be home in a bit. He hung up and sighed. Sorry, I have to go. A mountain of homework. Sure, Victoria smiled faintly. Thanks for coming. Let me know if you find anything else. Definitely. I'll do some more reading tonight. See you. He left, and Victoria remained alone at the table. She took a sip of her tea, staring out the window as the sun disappeared beyond the mountain horizon. Questions crowded her mind. A secret society. Balance. Why had Damien warned her about the book, especially if it was empty? Why did he always vanish without a trace? And how was she, Victoria, an ordinary teenage girl, connected to all of this? She didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing. This was only the beginning of something far bigger. Alex was sitting in Nadia's room, which looked more like a study than a typical teenager's bedroom. The walls were covered with posters of chemical formulas, complex equations, and famous quotes from scientists. In the corner on her desk stood a framed portrait of Marie Skłodowska-Curie. Everything was neat, orderly, and calm. The room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paper. Nadia sat across from Alex, helping him work through physics problems. From time to time, she leaned over his notebook, pointing out how to write down the data or rearrange an equation. Alex tried to follow her train of thought, his brow slightly furrowed, until eventually he leaned back in his chair with a dramatic sigh. Seriously, Nadia, he said with a smile, looking at her in admiration. You're some kind of physics genius. To me, this all looks like black magic. Everyone has their talents, she replied calmly. I'll never play football like you do, or sing with that kind of voice. Alex let out a quiet laugh. Oh, come on. It's not something I'm especially proud of. Nadia looked at him, surprised. Why not? He glanced away, hesitating for a moment. It doesn't impress my parents at all, he admitted. They want me to study medicine, but he shrugged. I'm just not cut out for it. I don't think like that. I'm not you, he added with a faint smile. And what would you want to do? Nadia asked gently. If not medicine? I want my band to start getting noticed, Alex said without hesitation. To play real concerts, festivals, travel around Poland, perform, live off music. Nadia's face lit up. That's a beautiful dream, Alex, and you should protect it. Step by step. Your parents. She smiled softly. Sooner or later, they'll have to understand that it's your life, not theirs. He looked at her warmly. You always know how to motivate me. I honestly don't know what I'd do without you. For a moment, Nadia said nothing. She watched as he leaned back over the notebook, scribbling something down again. She loved moments like this. The quiet, the calm, the way they didn't have to pretend. Around Alex, she felt entirely herself. Wow, it's kind of hot in here, he muttered suddenly, pulling off his navy hoodie. He was left in a sleeveless shirt that showed off his broad shoulders and toned arms. Nadia's breath caught. Surprised by the intensity of her reaction, she felt heat rush to her cheeks. She quickly looked away, but it was already too late. Hey, Alex said, leaning closer, touching her cheek lightly. You too? Your face is all red. She smiled nervously. Yeah, I guess, she replied a bit too quickly. She couldn't exactly tell him the truth, that it wasn't the temperature at all, that it was him, his presence, his voice, his closeness. Alex returned to his notebook, unaware of the storm he'd just stirred. Nadia sat up straighter and took a slow breath. Just a moment more. Just a little longer of this peace. After a while, Alex blinked at the open notebook, the equations still fresh with ink, as if they might solve themselves. He rubbed his face and sighed. Okay, maybe that's enough physics for today, he suggested with a grin. My brain's starting to boil. Nadia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Fair. At least we can still talk about history. Right, that project. Alex reached for the textbook, then dropped it again in frustration. The Safransky family. There's barely anything in here. Mentions, dates, dry facts, and we're supposed to do something original and in-depth. Great. Nadia nodded, equally unimpressed. There is one person who could help us, she said after a moment. Mrs. Wanda. Mrs. Wanda? Alex repeated, raising an eyebrow. The oldest resident in town. She lives on the outskirts, Nadia explained. I help her sometimes, with groceries, the pharmacy, little things. But the important part is, she used to work at the town archive. She knows the history of Cherry Valley inside out. Not from textbooks, but from documents, stories, old records. Alex straightened, clearly intrigued. Sounds like a walking encyclopedia. You think she'd talk to us? If we ask respectfully, definitely, Nadia said. She likes it when people care about the past, and she likes to talk. With her, even the simplest story sounds like a novel. So we might get more than just dates and names? Alex asked, eyes bright. Exactly. So, he said, already energized, do we visit her tomorrow after school? Yes, let's not put it off, Nadia replied. She smiled softly as Alex gathered his things. The room grew quieter, though the scent of lavender and paper still lingered. Thanks for today, Alex said quietly, glancing at her. Not just for physics, for everything. Always, Nadia replied. We're a team, right? He stepped closer and pulled her into a brief hug, one arm around her shoulders. Nadia was shorter, so her head rested naturally against his shoulder. She felt the warmth of him, and the subtle scent of his cologne, fresh with hints of sandalwood and citrus. For a heartbeat, she stayed perfectly still, wishing she could freeze the moment. Then he stepped back. See you tomorrow, Alex said with a smile, crossing the threshold. See you, Nadia replied softly. When the door closed behind him, Nadia was alone again in her perfectly ordered room, in silence, but with a warm feeling that lingered in the air just a little longer.
Can I trust you when the